introduction to our today's speaker, Laura Boyas-Kaite. I'm pretty sure I butchered it already, even though I tried in my head. You got your bachelor's degree in biochemistry from University of Vilnius, your master's degree in pharmaceutical science from University of Copenhagen. Then you continued at the University of Oslo with your PhD, and you stayed in Oslo where you're doing your postdoc now at the GLIA lab. So it's really nice having you here. Apart from this, you're also doing these outside communication initiatives with Laura Neurotalks and Brain Talks. And that's one of the reasons we have you here today for our science communication webinar series. Thank you, very welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for having me. It's very, very nice. So I think that I'll just kind of go ahead and at least start sharing what I have for you today. So we're not so many, even though I plan to engage people and talk to them. And this is actually one thing that is really advised to do when you communicate science, especially if you're presenting, is to engage your audience and kind of create this warm, very friendly atmosphere, because then everyone is relaxed, everyone is remembering things better, and then you are also more relaxed and you can communicate much better. All right, but then we start. So at first I thought that I give a little bit more towards why I can give this little crash course on science communication to you. So first, I really like doing it. I'm very passionate about it. I think it makes a lot of sense to me. For me, it's very, very meaningful. So I don't know how many of you work with patients, with humans. I work only with mice. So, and I do this fundamental basic research. So most of the time I'm just downstairs at the microscope, and I really, really lacked this kind of connection to the real world and seeing that what I do or makes a difference or makes sense. And then I kind of found it in the science communication, because then I can talk to people, answer their questions, explain something, hopefully make their lives better in one way or another. And that gives meaning to me. But then today with you, we will talk about all the details about science communication, like why you should do it, how you should do it, etc., etc. And yes, so because I really like doing the science communication, so I do a lot of it. And now over several years, it has grown into kind of like a little, I don't know, side business or this kind of side platform that I have, which is Laura Brain Talks. So you can also check it out if you want. It's called laurabraintalks.com. So I write, I speak, I have my own radio show, and do all kinds of other fun things. Okay, so plan for today is like this. So at first we will start by talking about science communication in general. I mean that I'm not gonna go in specific towards presentations, posters, writing, or like social media, because a lot of the fundamentals, or like the main fundamentals of science communication, are the same for however you communicate science. So I think that it's very good idea to build like a solid base, and then we can, at the end of the lecture or of the talk, we can go into more specific details or like more specific tips for popular science writing and also for presenting. And I think this for presenting would even go for kind of any kind of presentation, and trying to make it more convincing and easier to follow, more engaging. So we will start by talking about science communication in general. First, we start by why. Why overall spend your time and energy on science communication? Then who this science communication is aimed at? And then what do you want to communicate? And also how you want to communicate. So kind of all the how, what, who, and when. And recently I took this very, very good science communication course, and there they presented science communication from kind of angles that I haven't thought of before, which I think are very, very useful. And the first question that we were asked actually is, Why do you want to learn to communicate science? Why do you want to communicate science? Why do you think that is important? And what kind of positive effects there could be for you as a researcher? Because I'm sure you all know that there's a lot of people in science, and especially in academia, who think that kind of science communication is maybe kind of a waste of time, or like very not serious. Why would you do this? All that you care about should be writing scientific articles and grants and etc. But I hope that by the end of this lecture, I have convinced you that by spending time to learn to properly communicate science in an easy, engaging, and in an interesting way, you can also really improve being a researcher yourself. And that can actually give very positive effects towards your career. So here is actually where I hope that there will be quite a few people and we could engage in sort of a discussion. For example, like, why do you want to learn to communicate science, etc. But now, because I don't want to put any pressure on Eleni and Maria and Sally, I think maybe you can think about it a little bit now. And I will go through several of these positive effects that at least I could come up with, and which I think are important. So, for example, why communicate science? Why even spend time in this? So, first, of course, is that you severely improve your communication skills. And good communication skills are important in every aspect of your life, I think. Even at your home for personal relationships, and outside in the world, at work, in just general public, also for presenting even academic work, writing grants, everything. I mean, then you can clearly deliver your message in a clear, understandable, and convincing way, which makes it so that then you'll get what you want and you will get your message through. So learning to communicate science will definitely improve your communication skills, will improve your networking, as well as influencing and collaborating. When you have good communication skills, it's also it is pleasant to talk to you. So it gets easier to network people like you. It's easier to find collaborators. Another thing that I think is important to well, all of us scientists, I just want to make a laser pointer. Here we go. Is that when we communicate science better, we are much more competitive when applying for research funding. Now, to get funding, especially for basic or fundamental research, is almost insanely hard, borderline impossible. And I think that now everyone can write sort of a relatively good application. So what will make you stand out is if your application is written in a very clear, pleasant, convincing way. So again, learning to communicate science can definitely make you more competitive when applying for research funding. Third thing, which I think, at least for me, this is the biggest reason why I am in science communication, is that when you communicate science well, you can make your research more impactful, actually make an impact on people, on the world, make a difference. And I think that deep down, we're all in research because we want to make some kind of difference. We want to make some kind of change, some kind of improvement towards people's lives. And if you communicate science, more people will read about the science that you do or the science that you care, and make themselves familiar with your scientific publications. So then you can kind of ensure that people get, let's say, the correct or proper knowledge. You also increase the visibility of your research and also your research group. When you communicate science actively, you increase the probability of being found when people are Googling either for you or for the knowledge in your field of expertise. And that's going on a lot these days. People Google everything, and it can be you or your words that they read. Communicating science also can advance your career, and it can improve your trustworthiness. So now again, I don't know how many of you have experience in applying for funds and for funding, but many grant applications now even have a part of the application where you actually have to write how you will communicate your findings if this project is funded. Also, communicating science, of course, makes knowledge usable and used. And that's the whole reason of making and creating new knowledge, so that it is used, not just that it lays somewhere in a drawer. It can contribute to more relevant research through dialogue and interaction with stakeholders. So maybe this is something that is not so well known, and this was a little bit new to me, but it makes so much sense. So stakeholders basically are everyone who benefits from your research. So for example, you study epilepsy. Of course, you want to treat epilepsy patients better. If you talk to epilepsy patients, maybe you get to learn what actually is the most important to them, to manage one symptom or another. Of course, to treat the disease, but you can get actually valuable input, what matters to your patients, so you can actually design and change your research to fit those needs. So it is actual important and relevant difference for real world, for epilepsy patients. And these days, of course, the last two things that are important. So communicating science will fight against fake news and disinformation. We have seen a lot of horrible examples, especially in the pandemic, and how it is important to actually put valuable information or like a trustworthy, correct information there. And another thing, which is sort of a last, but it really might be fun. When you communicate science, you have no idea. I mean, you just kind of put it out there and you have no idea who will come talk to you, who will reach out to you, what super fun, interesting projects you will be involved. So at least for me, it is a lot of fun. Okay, so now these are just some of the reasons why you would like to or you should communicate science. There's also some people feel kind of this responsibility because research usually is funded from public money, so it's sort of giving it back to the public. But this again, I mean, some feel it, some don't. I feel it maybe a little bit, I think, but something to consider. All right, this is actually one citation, one quote that made a lot of sense for me to sort of sum up what is science communication. So I'll just read it out loud now. And there's actually, there's a lot of research done on science communication research, which is very, very interesting as well. So first, science is arguably the greatest achievement of our culture, and people deserve to know about it. Second, science affects everyone's lives, and people need to know about it. Third, many public policy decisions involve science, and these can only be genuinely democratic if they arise out of informed public debate. Again, science communication. And fourth, science is publicly supported, and such support based on at least a minimal level of public knowledge. So the more you give to general public, potentially more kind of opportunities for funding will also come to you. This was, again, another very cool and important angle regarding science communication that I have not thought before, is that policymakers, such as politicians, all kinds of departments and associations that actually make a difference in everyday people's lives, they do not read the research papers. They don't usually have a lot of scientists on their boards, but they Google. They Google the topic about which they're taking decisions. They Google relevant people. So this is yet another reason why it makes sense and it is important to communicate science, especially if you're interested in making kind of a societal impact with what you are doing. Then we go sort of more into depth about science communication. And I mean, you can ask yourselves also, what is the meaning of communication, right? And communication is to make common, basically, to do things jointly, to be in relation with, but mostly to make things common. And the challenge always in research communication is to make science and people common together, to sort of build this bridge between science and this hard technical jargon. Sometimes I read papers from my own field and I cannot understand what is the meaning of that amazing method or amazing research paper that they did. And then I think, well, great, but so what? If no one can understand it, what's the point in kind of doing it? So this is sort of the challenge of research communication. And when we understand this challenge, it is kind of, well, simple to understand what needs to be done to kind of, well, fight this challenge or to overcome it. And research communication is absolutely essential in making knowledge understandable, usable, and used, again, so that it doesn't just lay there collecting dust on some kind of shelf. So the main principle of research communication is to make science as simple as possible, understandable, also make it relevant. So every time you communicate research, you should make it clear why what you are saying is important to the person you are talking to, why they should care about it, why it is relevant. And of course, people will listen to you if what you're saying is interesting, because if it is interesting, it takes very little energy for people to listen to you. So it's very kind of easy, simple, people appreciate that. All right. So we start now with a kind of, now we have covered why we should communicate science. So now I hope that everyone listening is very passionate about science communication and understands why it is so important and also relevant and beneficial to us to communicate science. And then we move to the second question, which is who you are talking to. Who do you want to talk to? So when you decide that, okay, now I want to communicate science, who are your target groups? Do you want to talk to the general public, which is the most horrible target group that one can think of because it's so broad and completely unspecific? Do you want to talk to patients? Do you want to talk to children, to teenagers, to adults? So this is, again, I kind of wanted in the beginning to have like a discussion group, but then we can kind of go to all of the possible target groups to whom you are talking. It can be, as I said, general public, which is absolutely way too vague. Maybe it's some businesses because you want to get some funding or you want to implement some intervention specific for businesses. Is it children or adolescents or adults or elderly? Is it patient groups? Is it some kind of trade associations or interest groups, for example, epilepsy groups? Is it some agencies or municipalities? Maybe you want the community you live in, that part of your city or your country, to change how they treat or deal with epilepsy patients. Is it policymakers? Are you aiming to talk to schools or teachers, journalists, media? So it's so many different target groups. And the whole point in identifying with, so every time you communicate science, you should define firsthand who will you talk to. It can be several different target groups. And why is it important to know who is your target group? Is that every time you talk to someone, you should tailor what you are saying specifically to that target group. I think everyone will agree that if you talk to, let's take a very simple example. If you talk to kids and if you talk to adults, you will talk very differently. You will stress different things. You will phrase yourself differently. If you talk to, for example, epilepsy patients and just, let's say, general public about your epilepsy research, again, you will talk a bit differently. If you will talk to completely uneducated people, and if you will talk about people who know a little bit about your research, again, you will kind of fine tune how you talk. So know your audience, and tailor your content to your target group. So here I kind of want to give a few examples of sort of what I mean. So it is important to know your audience. Every time when you will communicate science, you should research your audience beforehand as much as you can, so that you know their level of familiarity with the topic and the scientific points, and you should relate your scientific points to issues they care about. So you should talk to them in a way that they care that you talk or what you talk about. So for example, if you speak to a group of parents, you should emphasize, of course, health impacts of science for their children's development. That's what parents care about. So you can communicate your science from that perspective. Let's take an example about microbiome and let's say microbiome diversity. So if you would explain microbiome diversity to a healthcare audience, you would probably emphasize its link to gut health, mental well-being. But for a absolutely general audience, I mean, microbiome first, diversity, people, it's hard for them to relate. So you could just talk about the variety of bacteria in our gut, which impacts our health, including our mood. So you kind of simplify. So these are just a few examples what you can do. Another one I just wrote about sleep. So I do sleep research and I'm interested in sleep. And I can talk about sleep from, I don't know, at least several tens of different angles. And for example, if you talk about sleep for high school children, what do they care about? They care about being active, having energy, so that it's easy for them at school. So they meet with their friends and they're all like fun and cool, and it goes well with their like sports or something. So you can then talk about the importance of sleep to perform better, or that it would be easier for them to get a good grade on a test if they sleep well. You don't have to talk about how memories are consolidated and transferred from short-term memory to long-term to high school, but just that if you sleep well, you will do better during your test. Or if you want to perform very, very well in your basketball game, you will actually be much more sharp and much more strong if you sleep well. If you talk to doctors about sleep, you can talk about the importance of sleep for general overall health and what kind of tips they could give to their patients that are quick, correct, and efficient. If you talk about sleep with parents, then you can talk about how to prepare your child's bedroom or evening routine for children to sleep best, because then parents will sleep better as well. And if you talk to, let's say, tech companies or like industry, those people are crazy about productivity, I mean, and doing as much as possible. So you can always talk about sleep, that it's only if they sleep well that they can be their most productive, their most innovative, and make the best decisions. So this is, again, just sort of examples how you can fine tune how you talk about the same topic when you talk to different audiences. And that makes a huge difference in how much impact you can generate. Okay, so now you know your audience. Now we're moving to a third part of science communication, which is basically, why are you talking to them? What do you want to achieve? What's the point of you communicating science now to this audience? What is your message? What is your goal, sort of? And here again, I will just move forward to several examples of what you likely might want to do. And this is a busy slide, but I think it's a very good infographic to show the many, many, many levels of science communication. And this is all science communication. So when you communicate science, what do you want to do? Do you want to educate someone? Do you want to inform someone? Do you want to influence? Do you want to make a change? Do you want to find funding? Do you want to find partners, collaborators? Again, depending on what you want to do, it will shape how you communicate your science. So for example, if you, maybe you want to co-produce something, so you want to collaborate. Maybe you want to inform decision making with your research. For example, there has been a study done in Norway which showed that it is helpful or useful to give babies at certain age tiny traces of peanuts, because then those babies don't develop allergy towards peanuts. And those researchers, I mean, their study was very big, very well controlled, etc. And then they saw that it was important to get this information out in the public and actually added to the guidelines for parents that this is now recommended. So that has been also a very long road towards that, where they had to do a lot of science communication about their research to parent groups, to policymakers, to all kinds of other agencies. And you can also communicate science in many different places or venues. I mean, it's live, is online, it's written, it's oral, maybe it's lectures or talks or festivals, podcasts, blogs. All of this will really shape how you communicate. And you will do yourself a very big favor if in the beginning you will sit down and you will think what you want to say, where and how, and to whom, because that's going to help you kind of shape how you should communicate. Okay, now we are moving towards how to communicate science. So sort of many tips that there are on how you should communicate science when you're trying to sort of popularize your research or any other research that you care about. And I found this really great website. I didn't know about it before I actually prepared this lecture, but now I'm very happy I found it. It's really good. It's called Quest, and they have insanely good resources for science communication. And for now, I took this slide, and they do a lot of research on what works best for science communication, which is why I like this resource. It's science-based. It's not just whatever AI generated or someone told this. And I really agree with this 12 quality indicators for science communication, what your science communication should be. So first, of course, because we are communicating science, it should be scientific and factual. So it should be correct. Don't say things you're not sure about or that you don't know. Don't lie. It's completely fine to say, oh, this I don't know, or oh, interesting question. I don't know about this, but I'm gonna check it out. Or you can just say, oh, I don't know the current status of knowledge on this, but I would speculate. I think so. Or let's say, based on this and this fact, I would think that it could be like this and this. Never feel that you have to know everything. It's totally fine if someone asks you a question and you don't know. Don't start making up things. So it should be, your science communication should be trustworthy and scientifically rigorous. So science facts, but then again, sort of balanced so that it's not too hard, not too much, and very transparent. So especially if you write, if you communicate science in writing, always have your citations, always have your resources. And if you have time, which would be the ideal situation, better take fewer projects, but have enough time to prepare for them, because then you will enjoy even the time preparing and the whole activity. But try to also research the newest papers on it, and best, of course, all of these meta-analysis if possible. Okay, so now we know that our science communication should be trustworthy, scientific. Then regarding the presentation and the style, so of course it should be clear. So when sometimes I have this feeling as well, even now when I'm talking to you guys, but that I'm talking and I know that this wasn't the clearest way to put it. So that's not clear. When you prepare, and you should always prepare for the science communication, make sure that it's clear, at least for you. It's very good if you have friends or family or someone on whom you can test your science communication who is not in your field, best if it is same type of audience that you want to reach, because you will get very, very valuable feedback on whether you need to change something. Of course, your presentation should be coherent and contextual. Your audience should never try to guess why you said a certain thing. It should always be clear. You know, sometimes some people, let's say you're listening to a talk or a presentation and someone says something and you're like, I'm not sure I follow. This should not happen to your audience. So you should be very consequential, very orderly, and it should be always very clear why you are saying the things and the order that you are saying. Spellbinding is a bit harder to achieve. So that can we can sort of leave towards when we are at very high level, I guess, of science communication. But interacting with audience. So this is also something that I mentioned in the very beginning. That really helps everyone. That helps everyone to relax and to kind of remove this invisible bridge between you and the audience. Everyone is a bit more relaxed, is a bit more chill, it's better mood, and then the communication even flows a bit better. And then when you communicate science, again, it's very nice if you communicate something that is, let's say, very, interesting, would never think about it, that it was like this and this. But in general, people like to hear something they care about. So you should connect to your audience. Your science communication should be purposeful and targeted. So here again comes the importance of knowing your target group. Why should they care about the thing you are talking about? Do they want a new treatment? Does it affect their family members? Does it affect their children? Does it affect how they should eat? Does it affect some kind of cost in the everyday life? So why should they care about? Your science communication should be also impactful. So again, make some kind of benefit change or impact on the audience. Relatable. This is something that we will talk about. So it is always, I'm sure that you also experienced it, that when you're listening to someone talking or when you're reading some kind of pop science, and if you can think, oh, that's me, or like, oh, that happened to me too, like, oh, this person also experienced that. Human connection, relatable. So never be afraid to be yourself and be a little bit personal when you talk science. That again, that creates trust, that creates connection, and then people listen and hear what you have to say. And of course, responsible. You are in the position where you have access towards information most people don't. You understand scientific papers, you understand research. General public do not. And if you decide, and I hope you do, to communicate this, to translate this vast and very important relevant knowledge to the general public, you have to do it responsibly. You have to do it kind of proper. Again, as I said, don't lie, don't create things because you're afraid to show that you don't know or anything. So do it responsibly. All right. So this was maybe a bit heavy, most probably, but at least before any kind of science communication, you can kind of open this, just look through, just kind of prime your brain for this type of work. All right. Yes, so now actually I wanted to go a bit more in depth, but mostly give you some examples on what we have discussed now, like some of these quality indicators that would make science communication good. So the first one again is simplicity. Don't use overly complex terms. No one likes them. No one cares about them. And even if you know them, it's annoying when someone uses it because it's a high cognitive load. I mean, it takes energy to understand them. So simplicity. Avoid jargon. Don't use very complex pathology or like disease or drug or whatever names. So for example, so I come from neuroscience, so that's why most of my examples are from neuroscience. One could say, hippocampal neurogenesis is essential for episodic memory formation. So first, who's hippocampal? What's a neurogenesis? What's episodic about memory? Instead, you can just say that new brain cells help us remember things that happen to us in every day. And that's easy, and it's the same meaning. Of course, the golden example of gene expression. So gene expression patterns, it's how genes turn on and off in the body. Again, instead of like myocardial infarction, you can say heart attack. Synaptic plasticity, basically it's brain's ability to adapt and change. And no one really relates to synaptic plasticity, but everyone really wants their brains to be able to adapt and change. And this is, again, reliable, relatable, and creates this human connection, and it's kind of simple and easy. And then again, as I mentioned before, and I cannot stress this more, test your science communication on your non-scientific friends or family. Testing and getting feedback is one of the most powerful ways to improve your science communication. It's hard, it's annoying, but it's really worth doing. Okay, then, yes, of course, this quote from Daniel Kahneman, who is a Nobel Prize laureate, and I cannot agree more. He said, if you care about being thought credible and intelligent, do not use complex language where simpler language will do. And this is really, really correct. Do not overcomplicate things if it is not necessary. Then we go to another very powerful way to make your science communication better, which is analogies and metaphors. This is very, very powerful because that brings kind of a visual and intuitive understanding of what you're talking about. This is very cognitively light for your brain to understand something new if it's an analogy or a metaphor. So analogies ground new concepts in familiar ideas, which eases cognitive load. It makes it easier to understand. So for example, explaining DNA as a recipe book for the body, where each gene is a recipe for a protein. It's super nice, smooth, easy, clean, pretty much then you can understand how DNA and proteins work. Another point, again, by thinking about your audience and what kind of analogies to use. So choose analogies that resonate with your audience background. For example, if you're talking to engineers, so engineers would connect well with computer or machine analogies, while let's say a lay or like general audience might prefer everyday objects like recipes or maps, etc. Same goes for whatever younger, older, women, men, or any kind of other professions. Another kind of analogy that I like to use as well is that brain regions are like different departments in a company. So they each have unique tasks, but they work together. You couldn't just have like departments separately. And here again, I just took analogy of departments and company, completely everyday things, to compare it to brain and regions. And that kind of helps because everyone understands how departments work in company. And now you can apply the same understanding to understand how different brain parts work. It's the same thing. Yes. This is something that I truly believe in. When you are presenting something in general, and especially when you are communicating science, don't be afraid to be yourself. Be yourself, be authentic, tell stories. Tell honestly why you care about what you're talking about. Why do you think this is important for the people you are talking to know? Why do you want them to know this? Why do you want them to understand? Use real life stories or case studies to illustrate, let's say, the things that you want to talk about. For example, you can maybe share a story of a patient with sleep apnea who transformed their health through treatment to illustrate the importance of sleep. Like they got their sleep back on track, their life was better or something. Create personal connection, like share what first drew you to your field, when you maybe had this moment like that, I know I want to do this research, or I got this result, this is very important, or when you felt the need to communicate the information you are communicating. This again builds relatability. People trust you, people want to hear more from you, people want to learn from you. So do not be afraid to be yourself. And this is again, this we will go through quickly, but these are just some kind of prompts that can help you feel better and more confident in, let's say, showing yourself a little bit. But this you can work on after the lecture or when you have time. But just think a little bit about your story as a scientist. What is your main motivation? What brought you to science? What brought you to the field you are in? What brought you to the research you're doing? Why you are doing it? Or even if you don't like what you're doing now, think about what you want to do and then think why, you know? You can also think a little bit, what do you answer when someone asks you what you do as a researcher, you know? How could you answer this? Like I say that I am a sleep neuroscientist, or I am a sleep researcher, and I'm interested to learn why is it that it's only when we sleep that the brain is cleaned from biological trash that can cause disease, or like something simple. And you can also think about, how do you want the public to remember you as a researcher? Do you want for them to say, oh, she's that epilepsy doctor, or like, oh, she's the one who is trying to find a better drug for epilepsy, or something like that? And try to kind of position yourself from these perspectives. Okay, we go further. Now we are approaching very much the end. So I can finish maybe in around 5 minutes or something. Let's see. So now it's kind of specific tips on popular science writing. So for any kinds of blogs, popular science websites, some very, very popular ones, which I really would recommend that you would get your research on, is Technology Networks and Technology News. I think they're called like this. It's a lot there. Of course, The Scientist, New Scientist, but that's high impact, let's say. So first advice, very surprising, very groundbreaking. Write. So the more you write, the better you will get. And at the same time, read. Read and pay attention. Note down when you read something and you like it. Note it down. What did you like about it? The phrasing, the sentences, copy that paragraph. Use it later to rephrase and fit your research into that type of thing. Write and read. That's how you will learn, by example and by doing. Remember that you are writing for your readers. So hopefully get some readers to test your writing on. Use easygoing, pleasant language, short sentences. Make sure that the flow of your thoughts is clear and visible, that that the reader doesn't have to fill in some kind of gaps between sentences, that it's always clear why you are writing what you're writing. And a very nice also advice is to write as if you are talking to someone at a cafe. Again, we're going to these examples and metaphors from everyday life to help the reader to relate to your message. Another tip, just really practical tip, is after you are finished writing, read it out loud, because some things will sound weird and then you will know to change them, and some things will sound very good. And then last point, just about the visuals, about how your text looks like. So use paragraphs, use nice spacing, lists, make some things bolded, maybe use bullet points, text boxes to stress something that's very important, so that it looks pleasant and it looks easy for the eye. I'm sure everyone feels this and knows, like if I would show one text with like nice paragraphs and some bullet points, some lists, some bolded, and then one which is like no spaces, no paragraphs, I mean, that one you don't even want to read. And the text that looks pleasant is inviting. All right, then I thought to give also kind of a template for a structure of a popular science article. So it's very different from a scientific article. So first is that, I know it's again very annoying, but you have to catch the attention of the reader in the very first sentences. Otherwise, no one will read it. So title, usually the title is the key to make it catchy. What's catchy is something surprising, something controversial, some kind of question, some kind of novelty. Maybe it's funny, maybe it's some kind of fun name for the project. So something that is a bit different. That's what catches the eye and then the brain. When you start writing, start with the main point. What do you want to say with this scientific article or with this popular science article? Why is it intriguing? Why is it novel? Why is it relevant? Why is it catchy? Why is it surprising? Maybe there was, for hundreds of years, we have thought like this, but new research shows that it's actually like this. Wow. And then you start explaining. So then you go on to what are the most important research questions and results and findings and conclusions? How did you contribute? Only afterwards you can share how did you find that out. So talk maybe a little bit about your method, data, study design. And at the end, always tell the reader, why is this important overall and for them? Why is this relevant? Why should they care? Best if you can somehow give some kind of practical implication, or maybe even give some kind of advice, so that people could, like, people have to know what should they now do with this knowledge. Okay, now because we're running out of time, I will go through this presentation tips, and then we're actually done. I had some examples from my presentation slides, but for the sake of time, I think it's also okay not to go through them. So presentation, again, practice, practice, practice. Observe other presentations. Take notes what you like in those presentations, what you like, what you don't like, what works, what doesn't. Second, good visualization and infographics. So a picture speaks louder than 1,000 words. A good graph, a picture, it's instant understanding if it's good enough. Then less is more. In principle, less information is better, more crystallized, more condensed, let's say, information that you can give slower and that you can take more time, make it clearer. Again, make sure that everything is clearly visible on your slides, that it is really pleasant for the eye, that it is tidy. Then it also, you show that you put effort, you cared. People react to that. People appreciate if you prepare very much for them. Very good idea is to engage your audience with interactive tools. Talk to people, open questions, discussion. Zoom has this annotate option where people can draw on the slide. So you can like give several options, have people draw a circle around, pick something. You can use slido.com, some kind of polls. It's always very fun to get audience involved. Also, one thing that at least I found that works very well for me is at the end, when I prepare my slides, when I prepare what I'm going to talk about, do I like my presentation? Am I proud? Do I like what I did? If not, well, more work if there's time. And if you do like, well, I'm not going to say that it's going to be the best presentation ever, but it's going to be good enough. It's definitely going to be good enough. Another thing that audience really likes, which I did not have in this presentation, is help your audience know where they are, time and progress. How much of the presentation has already gone, where we are, how much is left. People are then less stressed and less thinking sort of how much more of this do I have to endure, you know? And this can be helped by table of contents that is repeated after every big section. Give people summaries, take-home messages, some kind of midway summaries. And always, like after every slide, in principle, you can give, you can say a sentence or something about the meaning and the purpose of each message. Like, for example, now by the end of this slide, you have some tips on how to make better presentations, or why they should care about. Okay, then I had a bunch of slides. So for example, here I kind of sketched how memories are made. So you can just make like some simple neurons and like primary encoding and then consolidation during sleep. This was about traumatic memories, that normal response is that over time, traumatic memories kind of get reduced and emotional content goes down. But with pathologic response, this emotional aspect doesn't die down. So this is also something that I kind of gambled and just tried with like funny pictures, and people really liked that. I got some feedback afterwards. Like use color, you know, like good is green, bad is red. That also helps people. Here I was talking about one study where scientists tested sleep duration and how easy it is to get sick. So like they had a group of people, they divided that group of people into two groups. One group slept more than 7 hours a night, so good enough sleep. The other group slept too little, just 5 hours a night, and they slept like that for one week. And afterwards, scientists gave them nose spray with rhinovirus, so runny nose virus, and then looked at how many people got sick. And then, of course, those that slept too little, they 3 times as many people got sick. So it's kind of little illustrative ways to also, if you talk about kind of research. Yes. I just thought, yes. So then this was, I think, the most important from the talk, to remember what kind of science communication is good. And then this is the end. And then I just want to leave you with this, that why communicate science, right? When we have so many other things to do. But I think that deep down, really, we all want to make a difference, a change, some kind of impact on the real world. I think that's why we're in research, to push the border of the knowledge, to bring something that we bring something new. And basically every situation in which you as a researcher get the occasion to collaborate or communicate with people outside academia can make this difference. It can raise your societal impact. So I think it is very important to learn to do it well. And that's it from me.
It was honestly a great presentation. I failed the test for the complex expressions. I think I have lost my ability to talk simply to the people. I hadn't even realized brain plasticity was a science term.
Yes.
But it already helps. In the few minutes that we have, I will ask you a few questions. First from the audience. You did talk about giving a good presentation for science communication, but would it differ a lot when we're trying to make a good presentation for a disputation? So when we defend our PhD, for example?
Yeah, I mean the general advice, I don't think it is different for popular science presentation and let's say your defense, because I mean the clearer, the simpler it is, the better is also for you and for the opponent. But then of course for your PhD defense, there are some additional things on how to make it a good presentation. So for example, again, not overloading it with information, to choose the most important findings to show them clearly. Then also when you make the graphs, we can have another workshop if you want. But like you know, on like how to prepare a good PhD presentation. So when you, for example, also when you show Western blots or plots or anything, make sure everything is visible, that the fonts are big enough, that all the you explain the graphs, etc. That's kind of the mostly what I see is that of course people get very stressed when defending a thesis, of course, and then they show a bunch of graphs, half explain like maybe 3 out of 10, and then you don't understand why. And then for example after each slide, like you show, okay, in this in this project we did this and this, and you show the data, and then let's say you bring a text box in the middle that is clear. What does that mean? What's the meaning then of this, and how does that relate, let's say, to another project? Yeah, but anyway, we can make it another workshop on that.
I will have another question. How would you answer the questions from your opponents in a smart way?
Oh yeah, but that's a super vague and very broad question, but I think I have some tips. So first thing is that if you know the answer, that's fine. Then you just answer the question. That's actually no problem. Ideally, answer the question without too much elaboration or like too many details, even if you know them, because then they will ask about those details, so you will again have the answers for it. So don't give too much immediately. If you are not sure, or if you completely don't know, first thing is not to panic and not to say, "Oh, I don't know, I'm sorry, I should have read up or something." No, you shouldn't have known. It's fine. You cannot know everything. So then you can just say, okay, I'm not entirely sure, but I think blah, 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 blah. Talk something in that direction. I don't know, maybe someone asks like some kind of specific, like what proteins are involved in, I don't know, synapses in amygdala or something. And then maybe you don't know, but then you could say, oh, I'm not entirely sure. But in general, in synapses in the brain, we have many proteins that are specific for presynaptic, terminal, or postsynaptic or something. Just start talking in the direction, because then you will not get this stress response where you're just standing kind of silent. And again, like don't lie, just trust yourself and try to kind of speculate based on what you know. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an art, I think, to answer calmly and patiently, and in such a way that you don't seem rude in if the opponent is trying to evoke that. One last question. How do you train the skills of using an analogy or metaphor by yourself? I know
Yeah.
it's a vague question as well, but I'm really interested in that myself, because I say
Yeah.
use analogy or metaphor, and if you think for days, if you have the ability to think for days, maybe you come up with something. But if someone asks you on the spot, then how do you use the analogy or the metaphor?
Yeah. So very rarely in your life will someone ask you to make an analogy or metaphor on the spot. So usually you have time to prepare. But how you can read, look for examples online. Just read popular science articles on the topic, on your topic, and then you will find already many that someone else has thought of, and then you can use them. So just read and find some. And now we all live in artificial intelligence in the times, so you can even just ask ChatGPT, like can you make me a metaphor for DNA methylation or something, like can you make me a metaphor or analogy about this and this for this and this audience. So basically, you find inspiration in other texts. And even just, for example, in general, reading popular science books, popular science texts, sometimes maybe you will find some nice metaphors and analogies about immunology that later actually will help you create something maybe for neurology or something. So, yeah. Read a lot, observe what you like, find these analogies, and then use maybe AI tools as well.
Read, 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 write again.
Yes.
Thank you very much once again. It was a great presentation. We are very happy to have you on board, and we will probably contact you again for more presentation tips.
Yeah.
I would also like to thank everyone who joined today and who watched this webinar online afterwards. It was a great talk.
Thanks. Thanks for having me. I hope that was useful. Okay.
For sure it was. Goodbye.
All right. See you.